Hello, in this presentation, we'll be discussing different audit tools within the poultry industry. To begin, here's a little background about different types of chickens. The first one is the broiler. These birds are only for meat consumption. And the next one is layers. These birds produce eggs for table consumption. And then lastly, we have breeders. These birds are meant for hatching purposes for either the broiler or layer flocks, so those will be the chicks of the broilers or layers. Within this presentation, the audit tools we'll be discussing are for broiler chickens.
Moving on to production systems. A production system refers to the way in which an animal is raised. These systems usually help identify target consumers and tend to affect the product prices as well. So what types of production systems are there? There are actually many of them, but we have addressed a few of the most common types in this presentation. Starting with our first one, birds in a conventional system are raised completely indoors and are always in cages. Depending on the company, antibiotics and hormones may or may not be administered to the birds. This type of system is usually the most inexpensive because it requires the least amount of resources. In a cage-free system, birds are raised indoors but are not confined to cages. The birds additionally don't have any access to the outdoors. Antibiotics and hormones may or may not be administered in this system as well. Moving on to free range, birds in this system are raised to have outdoor access, which allows them to display more natural behaviors. Antibiotics and hormones are not usually administered in this system, but that is not always the case. Finally, there is an organic system. In this system, birds are raised in living conditions that fit their natural behaviors. In order to be considered organic, birds need to be fed 100% organic feed. Antibiotics and hormones are not administered. This system tends to be the most expensive because it requires the most resources and labor. Production companies that have organic products often have one of two procedures. One, if an animal requires antibiotics, the animal is usually cold or removed from the flock after being treated. Or two, if an animal requires antibiotics, the animal is treated and then is marketed as non-organic when the time comes. This is a quick overview of poultry production. Raising market chickens begins by placing eggs in an incubator that's located in a chick hatchery. After the eggs have hatched, chicks are counted and graded before being sent to the customer's farm. Broilers are ready for market in around 40 to 45 days. Breeders are kept in production for 44 to 60 weeks, and layers are kept in production for about 85 to 100 weeks.
In this slide, I'll be discussing economic impacts in California and the U.S. for the entire poultry industry. So this is including not only just broilers, but also layers. So for California, reported in 2020, the total economic impact was $44 billion. Within this impact, it created over 150,000 jobs. For the United States, reported in 2016, its total economic impact was $141 billion. And with this impact, it created over 1.6 million jobs across the country.
There are two audit tools that are primarily used. One is conducted by the National Chicken Council, which was established in 1954 in Richmond, Virginia, with the primary focus in the broiler sector of the poultry industry, with a mission to influence important legislative and regulatory policies and government programs that affect chicken, communicate with policymakers and media about chicken production, processing products, and the effect that domestic and international trade policy has to maintain and expand foreign markets for U.S. chicken. And lastly, to promote and protect the image and reputation of the industry. And the difference of this organization compared to the next one is that this one specifically aids in the policy making to benefit the poultry production And this audit tool appears to cover conventional and/or organic systems. And Purdue is the primary company that uses this type of audit tool. The next audit tool is conducted by the American Humane Certified Program, and they were established in 1877, and they pride themselves on being the first to serve bonding relationships between humans and animals. And they're involved in industries such as entertainment, conservation, rescues, and their mission is to commit that every employee is ensuring safety, welfare, and well-being of their animals. And their audit tool evaluates the physical well-being and mental welfare in poultry, so it fits in perfectly with their mission. This audit tool has the intent of covering facilities in various geographic regions and facilities with different types of poultry systems. And the primary company that uses this tool would be Foster Farms.
So what production systems would use these audit tools? As mentioned earlier, conventional and/or organic systems would use NCC's tool because those are the types of systems that the audit is designed for. For example, Purdue prides itself on being a production company that raises its chickens to be cage-free and antibiotic-free, which would go hand in hand with the council's organic system audit. American Humane's tool can be used for essentially any system because it's designed to cover facilities of all types. For example, Foster Farms is a production company that prides itself on raising its chickens without any added hormones or steroids. In this case, American Humane's tool can be used thanks to its flexible structure.
Okay, so Purdue mainly appeals to organic consumers. They are specifically free range and they feed their poultry 100% vegetarian diet. And so they appeal to consumers who are against GMOs and antibiotics. According to their website, they have approximately 28 organic products, and that ranges from cuts of poultry to different products they've come up with, like chicken nuggets. Purdue also offers various other types of products like free range and gluten-free, which obviously appeals to a more broader range of consumers, which is better for the company. Currently, they have a variety of 40 free range and 20 gluten-free products available. And as you can see in this picture, like I said, they're not just selling cuts of poultry, it's also different products like these little dino nuggets. So the overall target consumer in the poultry industry is obviously anybody who eats poultry, eats eggs, but it's really interesting because since the 1970s, that's actually risen so much. As you can see on this graph, the dashed line is poultry, and the two lower ones are beef and pork. And so since, the 1970s, it's risen by 160%. More and more people are eating chicken.
So we got retailers of Foster Farms, Walmart Supercenter, we got Save Mart, we got Food Max, Vons, Costco, Food School, Smart and Final, and it uses American Humane Certified Program tool. Purdue, retailers of Purdue include Sam's Club, Whole Foods, Costco, Walmart, Vons, and Target, and they use the National Chicken Council tool. Now, audit tools usability, we got Foster Farms, which again uses American Humane Certified Program. The systems include cage-free, free range, organic, and vegetarian fed options. And then we got Purdue, which uses the audit tool of the National Chicken Council. The systems include organic, free range, and a veggie diet. So the price points of, for example, Costco, Purdue Harvest Lamb boneless, skinless chicken breasts, they're for $18.99 for 2.25 pounds with the average price of $8.44 a pound. Now Purdue from Walmart, a whole chicken is $4.90 with an average price of 98 cents the pound. Then I got Foster Farms chicken breast, boneless, skinless, $28.99 for 10 pounds with an average price of $2.90 a pound. And then we got Foster Farms whole chicken, which 4.2 to 6.3 pounds is about $6.48 with an average price of $1.16 a pound, which is a big difference as you could see from Walmart from Purdue.
Moving on to the scoring protocol of each audit tool, American Humane's audit tool is divided into individual audits such as hatchery, processing, transportation, and so on. Each individual audit receives its own score, and scoring is absolute, meaning that producers either get full points if the standard is met, or they get no points if the standard is not met. To be certified by American Humane, all pass or fail sections must be passed, and each audit must receive at least a score of 85%. Because American Humane's tool can be used to evaluate various types of facilities in different locations, the tool uses an equation to calculate the overall audit score. This will be explained in a little more detail later in the presentation, but essentially the points get adjusted by subtracting all the items that do not apply to the facility from the total points possible. Then the points that are achieved by the facility are divided by the adjusted points to get the overall audit score as a percentage. If a producer receives less than a score of 100%, they must submit a corrective action plan to address the points that are not achieved. As for the NCC's audit, the council's audit is divided into 5 areas: corporate commitment, training, hatchery operations, grow-out operations, catching and transportation, and processing operations. Only the corporate commitment and training areas need full scores to pass those areas. The rest of the areas need varying minimum scores. Each area has points or objectives that need to be met. Like American Humane, NCC's audit tool has areas that have absolute scoring. However, there are exceptions to this. Objectives that are graded based on a sliding scale, on a sliding score, such as gate scoring, are not absolute.
Next, we'll be discussing comparison of management aspects. To begin, we'll be discussing lameness and comparing the two audits tools, what the requirements are for lameness. So to begin, American Humane, they want 1 year of daily records needed for that gate scoring, and then 85% or more of birds must score a 0 on a 0 to 2 point scale, and if that 85% was not reached, they would like to see documentation of corrective action. And then to compare, the National Chicken Council, they also use the 0 to 2 scale for gate scoring, but they just want records of observation of 100 birds and no earlier than 7 days prior to slaughter. Here we have euthanization and comparing the two audit tools. So for American Humane, they only want trained farm personnel or the flock veterinarian to be able to euthanize the birds. And then they want training records, and within these training records, they want names, the methods that they used to euthanize, and the dates when those personnel were trained. When euthanizing, they must follow the AVMA guidelines of the euthanization of animals, and then they would like to see procedures and records of proper disposal of the carcasses. And then for National Chicken Council, what they had in their audit tool was that the hatchery must have a written program for cold chicks, and they also want to see only AVMA methods to be used for euthanizing the birds. Next, we have restraint and handling. Looking at American Humane, they want to be able to see that they're providing handling protocols for training for farm personnel, catch crews, and plant crews. And then they also want to see handling of the broilers to be kept to a minimum. And then comparing it, we have National Chicken Council. They must have a written training program for handling for hatcheries, grow-out operations, and processing operations. And to prevent mishandling management practices, they must be placed to minimize worker fatigue. So they want to be able to keep the workers alert and don't want to mishandle those birds. Here we have environment comparing these two. So for American Humane, the buildings are to follow biosecurity, structural, and operational SOPs. These are standard operating procedures. And so the auxiliary power, so this would be the generator. It has to be functional and always on site in case of like a power outage. And then birds are to be in a thermal, comfortable environment. So not too hot, not too cold. And the humidity to be at the right percentage. And then for the lights, it has to be at a minimum of 10 lux throughout the barn. And then lastly, for them, they wanted well-maintained litter, and it has to be accessed at all times. And then the litter is just like the flooring and bedding for the birds. And then to compare, we have the National Chicken Council. What they have is hatchery must have temperature range goal for the chick holding area. And then housing and equipment must protect birds from seasonal temperatures and predators. And also with biosecurity, so biosecurity procedures are implemented to minimize negative impacts on birds, so like diseases that can harm the flock. And then physical alterations. Here, the American Humane actually did not have any requirements about physical alterations, and some of these physical alterations could be beak trimming, or dubbing, and they didn't provide any information about anything like that. However, the National Chicken Council did for beak trimming. For the fast-growing strain of broilers, they shouldn't be beak trimmed because these birds only live about 42 days, so there's not really a reason why they should have their beak trimmed. However, for the slow-growth strain of broilers, they might need to have their beak trimmed because they live longer. And for beak trimming is to be done only at the hatchery. And there should be an SOP if the beak trimming is performed, and the hatchery should have that SOP. Next, we have stocking density. This is actually pretty important within the poultry industry. So for the American Humane, the stocking density is based on the target weight of the broilers. And what they had is at least 1 square foot for each 7.0 pounds of bird weight. And then comparing it, for the National Chicken Council, stocking density is determined at the end of the flock based on the target market weight of the broilers. And they actually provided an example of what it might look like. So this example is if live weight of birds are 5.6 to 7.5 pounds, then the stocking density should be 8.5 pounds per square foot. And then, so for weight requirements, neither audit tools actually provided anything for target weights, and these target weights would be for when they are market ready. And lastly, we have vaccine records. So for the American Humane, records of vaccination protocols and any vaccinations are supposed to be in the animal health plan. So that's supposed to be the grow-out operations. They should have an animal health plan and all the vaccine, what they used and how they administer the vaccine should all be in that plan. And then comparing it, we have the National Chicken Council. Hatchery and grow-out operations must have written training programs for vaccinating procedures.
Moving on to automatic fails, major nonconformances seen by auditors result in failure for that area, and both audit tools deal with these failures similarly. For the NCC, automatic fails include live chicks left in the waste stream after the euthanasia process has been completed, any abuse during grow out, catching, and transportation, birds lost during transportation. For American Humane, automatic fails include signs that a bird is unable to walk or is in great discomfort, live birds in the DOA bin, and live birds in the scalder. Continuing with NCC's automatic fails, live birds in the DOA bin are also seen as a failure. Other fails include live birds left in cage modules, birds that are visibly injured during shackling, and birds that have uncut caroid arteries after the picker. The rest of American Humane's automatic fails are instances of willful acts of abuse or neglect, such as throwing, kicking, yelling, scaring, and failure in providing food, water, healthcare, etc.
Here we have the auditor checklist. This one's for the National Chicken Council. So in the intro of the audit, specific instructions are provided, but in the individual section of it, the instructions are vague. The index describes how to pass-fail broken wings, foot pads, and gate scoring. The audit describes how to award points if there is a scale on grading. Lastly, the audit does not specify any training or certification the auditor must possess. And here we have the American Humane Checklist. Instructions for scoring are in each individual category of the audit section. Instructions for how to score if the standard is not met. There is no index on how to grade broken wings, gate scoring, and foot pads. Total points achievable and total points achieved is difficult to calculate. Lastly, audit does not clarify if training or certification is needed for the auditor.
When it comes to specific scoring and as far as the subjective items that the auditors are looking for, they're looking for gate scoring as far as the number of birds unable to walk throughout the facility. The gate scores are looking for 0 to 2 birds unable to walk, which will receive a 40 out of 40 points for that category. And if there is 3 to 9 birds unable to walk, then there will be 20 out of 40 points awarded. And if there's more than 10 birds unable to walk throughout the facility, then it's an automatic fail in that category and they would receive 0 points out of the 40 points. Auditors must also ensure that poultry are receiving a minimum of 4 hours of light that is verified by the vet as accurate lighting. And then the auditors are also looking for signs of damage on the compartments. They're looking for less than 3 damaged compartments out of the facility, which will receive 20 out of 20 points. And then if there are 3 to 5 damaged compartments, they're looking to receive a score of 10 out of 20 points. And if there's more than 5 damaged compartments in the facility, then that category receives a 0 out of 20 points. The American Humane Society looks for that 85% or more of all birds are able to walk in order to receive a 0 on the gate scale. The auditors must also look at the size of the shackles and ensure that it's sized to each of the birds in the line, so it's not one general size fits all. It's a very specific shackle to each bird. And the auditors also must ensure that there are 2 cages that are visually inspected to make sure that the birds have been properly stunned and that there's no signs of reconsciousness after stunning. And then they also have to make the judgment that there are no signs of aversion, mandibulation, or gasping prior to loss of posture.
Passing the audit for the American Humane Farm Program. So each individual audit receives their own score. And if a certain area meets a standard, full points are awarded, but if not, 0 points are given. And there's certain items on their list that may be applicable to only certain areas in a production system. So not everyone will have points there. So those points are just taken off from the total. For certification, the producer must pass a mandatory pass or fail item. So on the audit, there's certain things that they have to pass or fail. Like they don't get a point system, it's just pass or fail. And overall, they must receive a score of 85%. And if a score is below 100%, a corrective action plan must be submitted by the producer on how they're going to fix it so that it will be 100%. And then it's reviewed by the American Humane for approval. So this is what their scoring looks like. So as you can see, there is A, B, C, and D, and then the overall audit percentage column. So step 1 would be to count the total points possible for all items on the scored animal welfare standards audit tool. And then step 2 would be count the number of total non-applicable audit items, and you subtract the total non-applicable items from the total points possible for all the items. This will give you the adjusted points achievable for the audit. And then step 3, which is column C, you count up the total points achieved in the audit, and these are the audit items that were in conformance. And then the last step is to divide the total points achieved by the adjusted total points achievable to find the overall audit percentage. And so yeah, this whole chart just shows exactly how this is done. But with the National Chicken Council, the company can choose to audit all of or certain operations depending on need, right? So at least 3 grow-out houses are audited, and then the average is taken for the grow-out operations section. And if a non-conformance is observed on any part of their audit, it's an automatic fail in that section. And so there's more flexibility in the amount of passing points. So then this is how the National Chicken Council does their scoring. So as you can see, with corporate commitment, you need the max score. So you have to pass with 160. Same thing with training. When it comes to hatchery operations, there is a 40-point area where you could lose a few points. The max is 290, but you only need 250. With grow-out operations, as you can see as well, the max is 570, but all you need to pass is 490. So you can miss about 80 points in that section. And catching and transportation, you can miss about 30 points. In processing operations, you can miss about 70. And so there is a lot of flexibility in this audit. But just like American Humane, whatever you fail, you do need to turn in something about how you're going to fix that.
Improvements in tools. We got the American Humane. There could be an improvement in providing consumers with information about what criteria were met and which ones were filled by the farm. Providing more information on natural animal behaviors that could be permitted in addition to comfortable living conditions. Expanding the previous criteria to other species could be improved as well. And they got possible improvements in tools continue for the NCC, which is National Chicken Council. Chicken labels such as organic or farm raised can be improved by providing a more concrete term of what makes that chicken meet a specific label in comparison to others using that term differently. And then they could also provide different guidelines to each state in relation to their geography in which the operation is carried out in as well.
Now to our conclusion. So both audit tools do a great job in evaluating the animal welfare for the poultry industry, but we also thought that both tools would benefit from being more transparent when it comes with its producers. Some parts of the audits, like especially when it comes to the American Humane's, it was not very clear in how the overall score was calculated, but not much was needed to improve aside from what we just had mentioned. And this is the end of our presentation. Thank you for watching.